Don't forget to like and subscribe, and share your opinion down below. Entitled man finds himself in an unexpected showdown with a gunslinger. Hello Reddit. I stopped at a gas station in another part of my county this morning and was reminded of something that happened to me at this very gas pump back in the 90s. If you read my story about catching my wife with another man, this would have been about a year after the events of that story. I was on my way back to the office after being at the range all morning for semi-annual qualifications and stopped to fill my car. If you're interested, it was a grey 1979 BMW 320i. All of the pumps were in use except the one at the very end. I pulled up to the pump and started getting out of my car. Right as I was getting out, a large GMC 4WD diesel truck pulled right up behind me, like maybe a foot from my bumper, and blew his horn at me. It wasn't the stock horn, but a loud air horn. This truck had a lift kit, big mud tires, light bar, winch, etc etc. This truck was either new or at most just a year or two old. It was a very expensive truck. Anyhow, after blasting me with the air horn, the driver shouted out of his window, "Hey a-hole. Move. I gotta fill up." Right double quotation mark. I should note that at this gas station, the pumps only had gasoline except the last pump, where I was. This one had gasoline and diesel. He blew his horn again, but I just ignored him and started putting my card in the pump. At this point, he decided to climb out of his truck and confront me. "Hey a-hole. I'm talking to you. Move your pose car right now." Right double quotation mark. He was only about 5 feet 8 inches, 1.7 m, and maybe 140 pounds, 63.5 kg. He was pasty white with red hair. This kid couldn't have been more than 19 or 20 years old. He still had acne. Given the value of the truck he was driving, it was either daddy's truck, or daddy had bought it for him. There is no way a kid could afford something like this. I live in rural North Florida. As you may know, here in the deep south it is always hot, even during the winter. We only get a few weeks of cool weather, and very little actual cold weather. Well, it was late January, and it was only about 50°F, 10°C. I really love trench coats. I think they look cool, but because of our weather, I rarely get to wear them. This was a chilly day, and I had been outside all morning, so I was wearing one of my favorites. As this kid stepped away from his truck to approach me, I simply turned to face him. I never said a word. I stood square to him with my feet about shoulder width apart. I pulled back my trench coat with my right hand, revealing my badge and sidearm. I quickly tucked my coat tail behind my holster and lowered my hand down to my side. Yeah, I was doing my best Old West gunfighter look. I know it sounds silly, but I was much younger then, and my very busy life didn't give me much chance to be cool, or at least what I thought was cool, so when an opportunity like this arose, I took full advantage of it. The kid stopped in mid-threat and just stood there for a second. He was about 8 feet, 2.4 m, in front of me. His freckled face turned even whiter and his mouth just hung open. Then he stumbled backwards towards the door of his truck. He stuttered out apologies as he scrambled up into his truck. I just stood there looking at him like a statue, never moving. He threw it into reverse and left. He didn't just move somewhere else, he completely left the gas station. As he pulled out onto the road, a huge black cloud billowing from his tailpipe, I heard a cackling sound coming from beside me. I looked over and the lady on the other side of the pump was laughing her head off. She said, "That was the funniest thing I've ever seen. I think he crapped his pants." I smiled at her as I pulled my jacket back down. She stepped over to me with her hand up for a high five. We exchanged an enthusiastic high five and a couple of good laughs. I still have that trench coat, but not the BMW. I love that old car. Entitled brother tries to scam our family, instead gets owned by facts and logic. Before I begin this tumultuous tale, I would like to briefly give some context. Grandfather, our deceased grandfather that died before the outbreak of the pandemic. He was a wealthy man, working until the day he died. He was an accountant who worked for a big corporation, his own tax business, and teaching accounting. To emphasize, he was wealthy, but he had 5 kids, our dad, our uncle, and 3 aunts. He also had a girlfriend. And he set up college funds for each of his grandchildren. Entitled brother, my 28-year-old brother. We share a dad, as our dad was married before he got with my mother. He has a wife and 2 kids, one of whom he named after our grandfather. He is our central protagonist. His wife, put simply, is a gold digger. Lastly, it is important to note that our father and uncle are the executors of grandfather's estate. To recap the relevant characters, entitled brother, our dad, my brother's wife, our grandfather, our uncle, and grandfather's girlfriend. The story begins some time after grandfather's untimely passing. In his will, he named his 5 children. None of the grandchildren, my cousins, entitled brother, nor me, were named. This is apparently normal, since our parents would pass down the wealth when they die. I didn't care. I was just happy to get my college fund, since I didn't have a great relationship with grandfather. A couple months ago, entitled brother started demanding the money he received in the will. Our dad told him he wasn't in the will. Entitled brother doesn't believe him, so our dad sends him a copy of the will. That should have been the end of it. But if it was, I wouldn't be posting this. Entitled brother thought that, as grandfather's favorite, he would be in the will. They had spent so much time with him, and they had even named their daughter after him. After this happened, our dad lost his phone and all his contacts. Entitled brother wanted our uncle's number, and when our dad said he lost it, entitled brother accused him of lying. So then he called one of our aunts. She told him he wasn't in the will, because none of the grandchildren were, and she gave him our uncle's number. Remember, he has a copy of the will, and would have known that he wasn't in the will if he had actually read the F***ing will. I guess he remembered he had a college fund at this point. So he called the manager of his college fund account, only to find that it was empty. Actually, it was closed 5 months prior to grandfather dying. Though, it probably had nothing to do with the fact that he used it all up to buy a $1,000 camera for brother's wife, $5,000 engagement ring for brother's wife, and $1,000 in classes for brother's wife to realize her dreams of being YouTube's next big vegan nutritionist influencer. The total he got? $8,500, which was loaned to him as it wasn't actually being used for entitled brother's education. And it's gone. Then, entitled brother called our uncle. Our uncle wasn't dealing with his crap, so he said to call the lawyer that dealt with the will and all that. So that's what entitled brother does. And guess what the lawyer said? That entitled brother still wasn't in the will. So entitled brother accused our dad and uncle of stealing his will money. Entitled brother went on to continuously call our uncle, and our dad had to calm him down because he was so pissed off. The two wrote him a letter explaining that entitled brother was not in the will, he got his money, etc. But entitled brother clearly didn't buy it. We think brother's wife was an entitled brother's ear, telling him they were withholding his money or whatever. So he called grandfather's girlfriend. She thinks entitled brother and brother's wife were recording her, because they were trying to get her to say grandfather's lawyer, the one that dealt with the will, was shady. She said the lawyer wasn't, they had been working with him for 20 years. Ultimately, she told entitled brother that if he needed money, then entitled brother and brother's wife needed to get jobs instead of trying to get money out of a dead man. Oh, and that grandfather was disappointed and angry with entitled brother for wasting his college money and not going to college. This was a few months ago, and nothing hasn't happened, so I'm assuming entitled brother and brother's wife are done. Probably. I don't want to date you and you can't date anybody else. A few years ago I had a former friend I had a bit of a crush on in college. We will call her Mary. She eventually found out I had a crush on her and told me she wasn't interested. After she said that I moved on and a month later I tried getting things set up for a blind date. This was back when Yik Yak was still around, so I posted on there, any girls want a blind date for Valentine's Day? I got 2 replies and posted my Snapchat name to talk more. Surprisingly, the first girl was Mary. When I saw her name, I didn't mess around and just sent a photo of my face saying I don't think this will work. Mary responds definitely not. A little harsh, but I shrug it off because I still had one other girl we will call Jane. I actually hit it off with Jane. It goes so well, I tell Mary about it. Mary asks me her name and I tell her, and surprisingly it was a person that lived on her dorm floor. I think nothing more than a funny coincidence. I go back to having a conversation with Jean and we agree to meet at a spot on campus the next day. She does ask for a picture of my face, which I send. She also sends me a photo of her face. I compliment her and pray to God she has low standards. The next day I go to the spot and wait. 15 minutes pass, and nothing, she doesn't show. I don't have contact information other than her Snapchat, so I try messaging her. No response. After another 15 minutes, I mill around trying to see if I can find someone who looks like they're waiting for someone. After an hour I give up and go home defeated. I assumed it was my appearance she disliked. A few days later I'm hanging out with Mary in a group and I offhandedly mentioned it to the group. Trying to laugh it off, I say, well, I guess I have a face only a mother could love. Mary then chimes in and says, well, OP, I told Jean about how I knew you. I also told her you had a crush on me at one point and I wasn't interested in dating you. She could tell I was confused and starts explaining. Sorry. I just wanted to let her know about how I said no to you. Sorry. Basically trying to save herself from clearly F-ing up. I didn't say anything because yeah, it was a low move, but at the end of the day, it was just a blind date. However, Mary doubles down on that action. Over the course of 3 months she starts telling people I'm stalking her, basically going to every female we both knew and tells them I'm unstable after she saw me leave a counseling session and was convinced I was in counseling because she wouldn't date me. I was dealing with a variety of different issues other than relationships that I won't be discussing here. Close bracket. I was more concerned that she was telling people I was unstable than anything. It got to the point where people I didn't know would say they know me because Mary would then tell them about me. I eventually confront Mary, but she blames her anxiety and the fact that she felt I only wanted to date another girl to make her jealous because she wouldn't date me. She was essentially trying to spread rumors about me for no other reason because I had a crush on her, and I responded to her saying I'm not interested by asking out other girls. I haven't spoken to Mary in years, but with Valentine's Day passing I felt some people could get a laugh out of this. I live in Colorado now with all the Mary Jane I can smoke to cope with women troubles.